Good afternoon, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Want to get on and go down the line from point of origin to the final destination. And there's a lot of points in between. We're going to go over some of those. So sit back, grab your notepad and pen, and get ready to take some notes. Because first we're going to start out with the data elements. Data elements are something that's put down on a record based upon somebody's observances. A lot of the times, these records have to have two witnesses, or three, or more. And what happens is we're putting the data elements into that record and convicting ourselves. There's a simple, logical, and reasonable path we can go down if we educate ourselves. And if you're in this educational forum for learning the law and how to operate or conduct yourself naturally as opposed to the legal system and everything, you know that there's all different kinds of implications along the way that people are getting screwed up on, but it really comes down to one basic thing, and that's the line of communication. And like I said, if we're operating in a capacity where we've got two people face to face, we've got a communication going on. But when we're in this modern time and we're on these devices and everything, and we think we're communicating from one point to another, there's all these other hands in the way that are grabbing data elements. And that set of data elements is started at the time mom starts seeing a doctor in regards to her prenatal care. Prenatal care. When you go to a doctor, because you know you've got a child inside of you, I urge you to comprehend that those doctors take a Hippocratic oath to Apollo and the Greek gods. And by entering data elements into that record, you're entering into a military record that is taking away from your supposed spiritual beliefs, no matter what they are, no matter what hospital you're having your child in, no matter what doctor you go to take care of this prenatal care. They take a Hippocratic oath to Greek and the Apollo and the Greek gods, not to your Muslim god or Hindu god or Buddhist god or Christian god or anything like that. It's specifically a Hippocratic oath to Apollo and the Greek gods. In that enumeration and naming, through all the use of the nouns and verbs and adverbs, adjectives, dangling participle verbs, all the grammar, from that point, it gets situated into another record, and they use a different grammar. And as it goes on down the line, they use different grammar, and it gets delineated from the truth more and more as it goes down. And what we're doing today is we're using information that we've been indoctrinated into believing that we're supposed to use. We're supposed to use a signature. I don't find that in the Bible. Well, I do, not necessarily in the capacity of a signature, but as in subscribing. We're supposed to subscribe our name according to Scripture, the way I interpret it, subscribe our name in the surname of Israel. And this, I believe, concurs again with Scripture, which I use as my holy writs, that we're not supposed to pay tribute to an earthly father, for there is one Father in heaven. So why are we using all these different last names under national patriarch that doesn't have a first or last name? It's just a corporate entity. So I find myself questioning, just like a lot of people, and it comes down to the data elements. And if you look under 19 CFR 149.3, they discuss data elements. And I want people to realize this is in the U.S. Code, which is lodged into the Federal Register. We're going to talk about that here in a few minutes. But this comes from the Customs and Border Protection, Department of Homeland Security, Department of the Treasury. It's for importer security filings. And what's happening is all this commercial paper that's going on, that's an instrumentality of the government. And it's supposed to be securitized. They are known as security instruments that can be securitized. But in order to be actual and effective, they have to be securitized in truth, according to the record. But what's happening is everybody's been indoctrinated, just like using the signature. They've been indoctrinated into using a name and an address after they applied for a Social Security card, which has a name and a number. And then you switch from, instead of using the name and number, to using a different name and number. Even though they look alike, they're different. The name and number identify the record. So if you're using the name and Social Security number, so they can coordinate the record, then you're using the beneficiary record. But if you're going around using the name and address, what you're doing is you're implying that there's a security going around and it needs to be securitized. And it hasn't been securitized yet. And I'll explain. Under that 19 CFR 149.3, they say the shipper, or excuse me, the buyer, the seller, and the ship to party can use a widely recognized commercially accepted identification number for this party may be provided in lieu of the name and address. That's the shipper, or excuse me, the buyer, the seller, and the ship to party. And then it says importer of record number, foreign trade zone applicant identification number. That's the title of this section. It says Internal Revenue Service number, employer identification number, Social Security number, or CBP assigned number of the entity liable for payment of all duties and responsible for meeting all statutory and regulatory requirements incurred as a result of importation. And that's what they're putting you down as when you use that name and address. You're part of the customs. You're operating as a customs officer. And that address is a principal place of business where you import goods and services as a resident, operating as a transmitting utility zone, as a foreign trade zone, and you're not qualified. That's why all the liability goes on you. You're keeping records. Can I see your driver's license? Sure. You just gave them a record without the proper contract being valid. They know you're holding a record and you're liable for it because you're operating in interstate commerce and don't know it, or you're not operating in interstate commerce and they're going to give you liability for it and you don't know that. And that all goes to the Interstate Identification Index. And I've explained this before. When you go to court using that name and address, you're an importer and they're expecting you to invest as an importer, to invest in the court registry investment system by giving them the data elements so they can show you got the liability. And that's in fact what's happening. When we look under 20 CFR 142.103, it tells you that the name and number identify the record. It's telling you here that the entity that holds the record is the liable party. The one that's holding the record is the liable party. Liable for payment of all duties and responsible for meeting all statutory and regular requirements incurred as a result of importation. For goods intended to be delivered to a foreign trade zone, the IRS number, EIN, SSN, or CBP assigned number of the party filing the foreign trade zone documentation with CBP must be provided. So, while they've got you confused in this liability department, they haven't filed the documentation with the Customs and Border Protection either, because they're creating a false record and you're helping them do it. All you got to do is correct the record by correcting yourself. You're not required to give a name and address. As a ship to party, end of the line at the last mile, the final destination, the ultimate third-party beneficial user, known as the benefactor, you are not involved in the importation. You are involved in the receiving of it at the final destination as an asset, not as a liability as a customs officer. And that's what you got to correct. You got to quit acting like that. The only way you're going to quit acting like that is quit giving them a name and address. Figure out how to give them a number in lieu of the name and address. That's coming up, because that's all through the Social Security application, Social Security number, and the birth registration. We look at the, and I've got all these links in the comment sections or the descriptions, so you can look along with these. Interstate Identification Index is also in coordinates with the National Fingerprint File. Now, the people that hold that is the FBI, Interpol, Consulate Affairs, Consulate Bureau of the Department of State, your State Bureau of Investigations, and Bureau of Vital Statistics. See, the Bureau of Vital Statistics is regulated by the Department of Commerce. So when you enter in through the Bureau of Vital Statistics through a birth registration, you're employing a Interstate Identification Index, and that number is usable in lieu of the name and address. We go to Title 5 of the U.S. Code, Section 301, under Government Organization and Employees. Departmental regulations. The head of an executive department or military department may prescribe regulations for the government of his department. So we have executive departments and military departments, and they can each prescribe regulations for the government of those departments. The conduct of its employees, the distribution and performance of its business, and the custody, use, and preservation of its records, papers, and property. The section does not authorize withholding information from the public or limiting the availability of records to the public. The words executive department are substituted for department, as the definition of department applicable to this section is coextensive with the definition of executive department in Section 101. When we see Section 101, it tells us the executive departments: Department of State, Department of the Treasury, Department of the Defense, or Department of Defense, and that's who issues the birth registration. We'll get to that here in a minute. Department of Justice, Department of Interior. Department of Justice is the one that puts down the Justice Manual, and that's outside of the Federal Register. Department of Interior, Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce. That's that Bureau of Vital Statistics. Department of Interior is you're an employee. You're part of the government. You're a U.S. citizen residing in a foreign country known as one of the states as a resident. You're part of the interior, the insular. Department of Labor because you got a job. Department of Health and Human Services because you got the SS5 application filled out, but you did it wrong. No one taught you how to do it, and you used a name and address on that instead of qualifying for just the number. You're only applying for a number. So before you even get the damn card, you're using a name and number or name and address saying that you're the trustee. So you need the card to operate as a trustee. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and you use that name and address as a resident. And they have the original issuing insurance contracts with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation for all the contracts of all public buildings. All public buildings under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 is Congress can lay and collect taxes, duties, and imposts. Posts. Needful places and buildings where people post things to the ledger. Principal place of business. You're the one posting it. That's an impost. Department of Transportation, of course, because while you're going from point A to point B, you're on the job, you're on the clock. You're going to import, you're going to export some information here, and you're going to import it there, and that's the process. You got to take it from here to there. You got to carry it, and you got to use your energy to do it. It's Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, and you got to be wise enough to know how to do it. So you have the Department of Education. And then, of course, the Department of Veteran Affairs, because like I've been telling everybody, it's all a military code. It's under the law of nations. It's military. All contracts are military script, whether it be here, France, or any other union member. The Department of Homeland Security, that's where we redress the address. These are all people that are going to end up getting involved. You're going to have to involve all of them. You're going to have to learn how to communicate. You have to become a veteran in that sense. 5 U.S.C. 105 talks about the executive agency, and it's a one-sentence statement. For the purpose of this title, executive agency means an executive department, a government corporation, and an independent establishment. When we look up government corporation, it says government corporation means a corporation owned or controlled by the government of the United States. If you're using their address in that contract with the Postal Service, you become the substitute trustee. You become the subcontractor with the United States. Like I said, because they claim you're a United States citizen and you agreed with it. They claim you're a resident and residing, a resident citizen of the United States, residing in one of the foreign states known as one of the 50 states of the Union of the United States. And you're performing business for them. Under the law of nations, you'll see it's also known as the principles of the laws of nature. It's in your nature to do it because you've been indoctrinated to it. Come out of her. Get back to your real nature. Learn what is true. You weren't born to use an address. You were born to sojourn and travel with him as a stranger with him in his lands, which shall not be sold forever. Because in all the lands of your possession, you grant the redemption. That's what tells us that we're supposed to go forth and abide by that redemption by replenishing the earth through that redemption. When we come across lands that have been spoiled in any manner, whether it be through their commercial use of imposts, we have the right to redeem them and replenish the Mother Earth and wipe those scars off of this planet. We have to be logical and reasonable about it. We can't just go down blowing people's houses up. To defeat one's opponent without fighting is of supreme excellence. So again, I suggest everybody start using their research by doing research and becoming educated through experience so you can gain the wisdom of that knowledge on how to use it. That's what it all comes down to, is your use. And knowledge is the benefit. And the better you use it, the better benefit you get out of it. So let's go to the next one. I've got an interesting thing here, and it's rules governing compliance with subpoenas, summons, and court orders of the Office of Inspector General. You'll see it in the descriptions. And it says the Postal Service is amending the Code of Federal Regulations. How does the Postal Service amend the Code of Federal Regulations if that's legislated by Congress? Congress shall lay and collect taxes and duties and imposts. That means they levy all the taxes through the codes, right? Well, here it's telling us the Postal Service is amending the Code of Federal Regulations. What have I been telling you all along? The Code of Federal Regulations is an administrative code, and the Federal Register is their register. The General Ledger is what regulates all of that. That's the judicial ledger, and that's operated by the Postal Union, who operates the Postal Service under a trademark. The United States is a contracting party with the Postal Service, under their trademark, which isn't trademarked, because they're a subcontractor to the contractor with the trademark. Read that document. It shows you. It says agency, Postal Service, TM. That's a trademark. We go down and it talks about the TOWIE regulations. The TOWIE regulations are basically kind of like the snitch regulations, preventing them from supposedly being able to demand documentation from each other. But yet they're demanding it from you, and you're acquiescently giving it up because you don't have this knowledge. See, that's a violation of trust law. Even as a trustee, no one can demand something from the trustee as another trustee. Even the beneficiary can't demand anything from the trustee. The beneficiary can dismiss the trustee and show that the trustee has been acting either not diligently or in bad faith or in complete unconscionable actions, but he still has no capacity to charge him. See, we're not supposed to be charging people. Our place is forgiveness. That Romans 1 through 13, or Romans 13 1 through 8. And then, of course, don't forget 9 through 14, wherein the commandments are set. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and we're supposed to rise up against those who place judgment against us, letting no tongue prosper. It doesn't say that we're supposed to go ahead and turn around and convict them and sentence them to death or this or that or charge them. Right? It says, let no tongue prosper against thee. No tongue shall rise up against you in judgment. Vengeance is mine. You let him take care of that. You let the rest of the world know what they're speaking is false. And the rest of the world in that association, if they want to take care of him, they can take care of him. See, that's the lion's den he's in. You associate with lions, the rest of the lions will eat you up. Just like a lion, they'll eat a predator, or they'll eat prey. And if they think you're bringing harm to their pride, just like a natural lion, they're going to take you out. So we need to learn about the TOWIE Act, which is in the, like I said, the Justice Manual. And if you look at the Justice Manual, again, that link is in the description. It says Title I is the organization and functions. The organization and functions is described in the federal code as through that executive departments. And it's just a matter of everybody handing down the duties of keeping a record to the next person. So as soon as you become party to keeping a record and giving the information through a name and address, you're a record keeper. You're an importer of the record by your actions. But it goes to, and that's going to put you in a tax position. But that goes to the antitrust laws. So we talked to the antitrust statutes and things like that. So we're going to be talking about Title 15 here pretty soon. And in that, you'll see they're going to talk about post-judgment collection. And that's for your own being made whole. That's not in rising up against them and condemning them. You condemn their word. You don't condemn them. You condemn the words that they placed on the record. You let their condemnation go to God, because their story isn't over yet. You don't have a right to condemn them and put them to death. See, the only way judgment comes upon a man is after his death, and that judgment is had by him. So when we place judgment on another man and put him to death, we're the ones acting wrong. We're not supposed to be doing that, folks, in my sincere opinion. And so when we talk about the Postal Service trademark, we're talking about the United States International Trade Commission. They're the ones that deal with that trademark. They're the ones that are setting forth this stuff. And that's why we're talking about international trade and trust laws. It's not a matter of contract. It's a matter of implication that you're involved in a contract and you're not. And they're placing liabilities on you because you don't know. It is, in fact, a matter of antitrust laws, and they are violating a trust against the beneficiaries. And like I've said many times, if that record reflects is nothing but 98% of taxes that are being paid by income tax that are being paid voluntarily, then that means only 2% of them are trustees required to pay taxes. So why isn't the record recognizing the beneficiary? Nowhere is that record recognizing a beneficiary. That itself should be proven in the minds of reasonable and logical men that something is definitely wrong, and there are many violations of that trust law, because nowhere is that recognition of a beneficiary being placed in the record. Sorry, we have to refer to a number here. We can't give you a name and address. That's protected information. That's protected location information. We can't divulge the beneficiary to you. That address is not a resident address. He's foreign. He's a beneficiary of the trust. He's not operating within the trust. It's very, very distinct. And then, of course, through the United States International Trade Commission, they're the ones that regulate the International Trade Administration. So again, we're talking about the International Trade Commission is the one that has the contract with the Postal Regulatory Commission to set the Postal Rate Commission, and that's all done through the Military Board of Commissions before it gets to the Civilian Board of Commissions. That's the International Trade Administration. It's the administration of that which the Trade Commission set forth. And that Trade Commission has a contract with the Postal Regulatory Commission. And it's all through the auspice of the Military Board of Commissions, Joint Chiefs of Staff on the international level. That, again, of course, regulate that Her Majesty's Customs Codes, the tax code. So we got to think about this. So we're going to talk about that trust code, but first we got to talk about how they're violating it, and that's that name and address. And like I said, it's a matter of a tax action. You're operating as an importer of the record, and the importer of the record is liable. That liability is a tax liability. The tax liability is a use of a related person or pass-through entities. And that's the name and address. It's a pass-through entity. Whereas the number is, like I said earlier in the video, it's the final destination. It's the end of the line, the last mile, the ultimate third-party beneficial user known as the benefactor. If you don't believe him, ask him. He should know. He is not a trustee. He has never been assigned a trustee. And he has never granted a trustee position to anybody else, unless you've done a power of attorney or something. Unless you've been doing those documents and using an address as a trustee yourself. See, that's a problem. We don't have a grantee anymore. This fictional corporation is not a grantee. It's under the auspices of a natural grant through the laws of nations that push forth the principles of the laws of nature. Now, in this law of nature, if you don't recognize your creator and that you are the benefactor of that creator, and you're allowing somebody else to administrate some kind of fictional trust, and you're signing documents and giving a name and address, then you have been completely fooled. They're using you as a pass-through for that liability. They're going to let everything pass right through to you. And that is a violation of 15 U.S.C. 1, wherein they have trust, etc., and restraint of trade is illegal. They cannot tell you that you have to give a name and number. When that officer pulls you over there alongside the road and he's asking for ID, he's already violating international trust law. He's asking for a name and address. He's asking for identification. If you want to identify the record, it's got to be a name and number. Social Security is the name, and the number is the number they gave you. There's the address. Social Security is the name of the account. Their address is here. The number they allow me to use, so I'm not illegally operating in trade myself, is that number. If you want a name and address, I can't give you a name and address because that would be illegally trading in commerce. Know this. I don't have an office. I've never written a statement of intent to perform the functions of public office. I do not use this place as a residence, as a principal place of business. It is where I am housed under international protection laws. And protection orders are given full faith and credit. And that protection order already exists. And that's what the full faith and credit of the United States is dependent upon. You don't place full faith and credit of the United States through some kind of charging instrument. Full faith and credit of the United States is the principles of the laws of nature. 15 U.S.C. talks about trusts in territories or District of Columbia illegal. Combination a felony. Now, if the United States is posing that they have a Department of Defense, and it says in UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, the Battle of the Forms, it says that the debtor is located in District of Columbia, and they're pushing that false trust outside of those borders. That is a violation. The birth registration in the state is a violation. You were not born in the United States. That is a combination, and it is a felony. I don't play games. Let them know. Learn this stuff so you too can let them know that's a felony and know how to stand on it. Because according to the documentation brought in the state under the issue of a Department of Defense registration, an agreement wherein the Department of Defense and an official of the state, likely the governor, the military officer, provided for the establishment of a procedure to assist the Department of Defense in assigning a number to a newborn child, a social security number, a security filing in the state. That's a combination that's illegal. That filing has to be made in the United States. Otherwise, it shows in honor for the record that you were born in the state and you weren't, in fact, born in the United States, located in Washington, D.C. This is plain writing, folks. And I suggest you learn that 5 U.S.C. 301. The Plain Writing Act is in there. That's where the plain writing comes from. That's where the Plain Writing Act comes from. That's where the minimum requirements for birth registration exists. And it says that it's applicable to Department of Defense. Department of Defense is the executive department that administrates the military departments within it, known as the Army, Marines, and Navy, and Air Force. You go on to the next one. 15 U.S. Code 1692A through 1692O. It's going to tell you the definitions of the Bureau. Again, I'm telling you, it's the Bureau of Vital Statistics, the State Bureau of Investigations, Federal Bureau of Investigations, Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection, Consulate Bureau of Department of State, International Bureau Director General of the Universal Postal Union. Communication means conveying of information regarding a debt. I don't communicate. I write these words are true and faithful. And they're under the full faith and credit of God, full faith and credence of God, the full armor of God. If anybody ever find me placing false data elements on the record, please say so. I don't wish to do so. My intent is to speak nothing but what is true. I do not talk about debts. I talk about the providence of his grace, the intercedence of his word, long before any commercial data elements are portrayed. Because he knew me before he formed me in the belly, before I was cast from the womb. I was sanctified. I was ordained to be a prophet unto the nations. I was not born in the United States. I was, in fact, not even born in this state. I was born in some room known as an infant, as a delivery room on an infant ward in a hospital known as an impost, a needful place or building for a military installation. I had no control of that part. But in that part, I was still born naturally. And nothing supersedes that. No data elements anybody has ever written down in any annals of time anywhere, and including all of them throughout the entire annals of time. None of them. The term consumer means natural person, obligated or allegedly obligated to pay. Wherein the term debt collector means any person who uses any instrumentality of interstate commerce. That name and address is an instrumentality of interstate commerce. Because even if you don't use the mail itself, if you want to have somebody come by and drop off some products, you have to give them an address so they can do so independently of the mails. Use of that name and address is an interstate commerce instrumentality. Or the mails in any business, the principal purpose of which is the collection of any debts, or who regularly collects or attempts to collect, directly or indirectly, debts owed or due or asserted to be owed or due another. So I want to ask you, if you go filing suits in these guys, are you going to give them an address, a name and address, proving that you're still involved in the interstate instrumentality of commerce without having the proper valid oath or contract, written statement of your intent doing so? I hope you're wise about this stuff, people. That's why I don't do it. Notwithstanding the exclusion provided by Clause F of the last sentence of this paragraph, the term includes any creditor who, in the process of collecting his own debts, uses any name other than his own, which would indicate that the third person collecting or attempting to collect such debts. So when you attach that name to an address, you're now using, like I said earlier, another name and address, which is not your record. You become part of that record because you want to use it. For the purposes of section 1692 F6 of this title, such term also includes any person who uses any instrumentality of interstate commerce or the mail in any business, the principal purpose of which is the enforcement of security interests. Again, if you're going to file suit against them and enforce some kind of false security interest, are you going to use the name and address, proving that you're still involved in commerce? Any officer or employee of a creditor, while in the name of the creditor, collecting debts for such creditor. Any person while acting as a debt collector for another person, both of whom are related to common ownership. What was the government corporation? The one that controls, because they have a common ownership of the address. Or affiliated corporate control. If the person acting as a debt collector does so only for the person to whom is so related or affiliated, and if the principal business of such person is not the collection of debts. So if you go to court and you file a suit, are you going to claim it just for yourself, or are you going to let them know that there's an interest in the United States as well, the unnamed party that hasn't been named yet? Are you going to name the United States, or are you going to go in there all gung-ho with your chest all puffed up and I'm the boss and I'm going to get a recompense and they're going to pay me? While all the time forgetting that you're using a United States address in contract with the International Trade Commission with the Postal Service, trademarked? I urge you to learn what the hell you're doing. Learn how to use all this against them. Because, see, when it comes down to definitions, you're not part of those definitions. In fact, what's happened is they've gone through an acquisition of location information, and you gave them an address for the location. And everything in that address is information, data elements that now belong to them. That couch, the receipt for the couch, yeah, that nice $1,900 leather couch that you just bought, they're going to come and acquisition it. Anytime you violate those codes, if you don't have a bank account that can suffice to cover the $3,000 that they think they owe you. Say they claim 100,000 and your house is only worth 48,000. All the material evidence that you have inside of there is worth another 42,000. There you go. You got 90,000. You still owe them $10,000. That's what the warrant comes from. You know, those inland marine installations, those are warrant officers. And everybody acting in the same capacity is acting as a warrant officer and issuing false warrants because the data elements don't match. And they don't give a fuck because they know you don't know that the data elements don't match. So they're going to come acquisition it. Communication in connection with a debt collection. Did you give them permission to communicate with you in regards to a debt collection? Yes, you gave them an address. You gave them the damn address, said you gave them permission. Harassment or abuse. Once you try to start correcting this stuff, they are not to harass you or abuse you. And if you do it properly, you're not going to be communicating with these lower level people. Like I said, you're going to be dealing with those executive departments. And everything is a false or misleading representation under 15 USC 1692E because of that. And you have to repent for your part in it. You've been giving the false and misleading representations. Now, granted, you didn't know because you were educated into that public indoctrination system by your mom and dad who were operating in the same capacity using an interstate identification number without knowing how it's being used. So I understand that, and that is forgivable. That is very forgivable, so I forgive you. It's easy, folks. The next one is the unfair practices. So once you let them know that you repent for the false and misleading and all of that, and you understand how it's forgivable, and you forgive them for doing the same thing. We got to come to a fair playing field. We can no longer permit these unfair practices. We have to validate that debt. Whose debt really is it? Is there really a debt? Because I'm telling you, folks, there really is no debt. It's all a presumption. That legal fiction is a presumption of the facts presented to the court, and they give a summary judgment on it. They gave their opinion until you yourself give the final declaration that, hey, that's false. I don't subject myself to that and know how to assert that and know how to point it out. Then it's never going to be finalized. They're just going to keep shoving that little ship around back and forth to everybody. Here you go. Here you go. Keep abusing him. Everything he puts in here, go ahead and acquisition it. It's not secured. Dump it right over. Learn about this stuff, folks. In 1692H, in regards to multiple debts, every time you use that address, you created another debt element. They're all debts. And all you got to do is correct the record. You got to quit using that address. You got to use a number in lieu of the name and address to avoid all the multiple debts that are coming in that door that aren't supposed to. Legal actions by debt collectors. They have no legal actions. Legal action is still confined within the interstate commerce. It's a battle of the forms. That's what the legal actions are. It's a battle of the forms. If they haven't come out, let them keep shoving them documents back and forth between them all they want. You have to come out of her. And you have to start learning how to deal with the executive departments. You don't have to issue an executor's letter. You're entering right back into that commerce by giving them a name and address to identify with the executor. Come out of her. It's insanity. 1692J, furnishing certain deceptive forms. This is what you forgive them for. Because while you were giving false and misleading data elements, they were giving false and misleading forms. Again, if that thing does not have an Office of Management and Budget number on it, then it's not actually dealing with commerce bound in contract. It's dealing with implications and presumptions and liabilities for not securing the contract. Exemption for state regulation. We're dealing with trust. The state can't regulate anything in trust. The United States can't regulate anything in trust. The trust is already established, and it is a global postal trust, and it is known as the post office. That's where you post. Procedures under 39 CFR Part 951. This is the Postal Service. Procedure governing the eligibility of persons to practice before the Postal Service. So if you're not eligible to practice before the Postal Service, you're not eligible to use its fucking name and address. You comprehend this? All those imposts are needful places and buildings. And by using that name and address as an impost, as a trustee, without clarifying, hey, I'm not the trustee, I'm just the third party beneficial user, benefactor at the end of the line, last mile, final destination from the point of origin, and nobody's supposed to mess around with my benefit assets in between. Those trustees are in fact liable for making sure that item gets to me. Then you're going to be using that name and address and not knowing how to use it properly, and they're going to abuse you. There is no lockbox that's going to keep it safe. Like I said, they will bust right through that door. The next one is 39 CFR 954.15, judicial officer. Rules of practice in proceedings relative to the denial, suspension, or revocation of periodical mail privileges. See, that's a mail privilege to have an address on that building. It's not a matter of mail privilege of being able to use the mail system. You become part of the mail system by taking upon the privilege of putting a mail address on the building. Judicial officer is authorized to act as presiding officer at hearings and to render a final postal service decision, not an administrative summary judgment. 39 CFR 951.2 eligibility to practice. Any individual who is party to any proceeding before the judicial officer, the Board of Contract Appeals, or an administrative law judge may appeal for himself or by an attorney at law. So you're subjecting yourself to the administrative law judge by the application of the address, the Board of Contract Appeals by the application of the address, and the judicial officer by the application of the address. All you got to do is set up your own diplomatic post. You're not subject to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 and 17, where it's a needful place or building. Because you're not needed. Your resident presence hasn't been deemed necessary by the board. The Secretary of Commerce and Secretary of Treasury. Have you ever been before the Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Treasury to make that determination whether your presence was deemed necessary as a resident in one of the states? If not, then it's all a presumption, and you've been falsely misleading them in that presumption by use of that name and address. I assure you, people comprehend the process of the paperwork in their commercial system, and that it is all regulated by posting it. If you don't post it, then the only thing that it regulates is what they post. Quit posting shit. Learn how to set up your own private links. Diplomatic post, using the post service under their trademark as the trustee, letting them know he's the grantee. This whole legal world works without a grantee, by acknowledging that there is a grantee and they are the trustee. But under it, like I said earlier, if everybody's contributing 98% of it voluntarily, then where are the beneficiaries? You got to start acting like a beneficiary. You got to step up as a beneficiary under his word. His word says that I fear not, for I have been redeemed. I have been called by thy name. I am his. So he holds me in his basket. I am his. Therefore, I must be the beneficiary. And he's the trustee holding me. The trustee is the holder of the record. I accord my voice accordingly. (18 U.S. Code 1951). Interference with commerce by threats or violence. You do not have to use that address. You do not have to communicate through that address. You can communicate through the Postal Service. And that's what I highly suggest everybody start learning how to do. They're the ones that set forth the final judgment, the final decision on what that address is, not the courts. The courts are believing you in giving it to them, that you're the liable party, making the judicial determinations at that. Funny how that works. And you do that by letting them know you need that natural area code. And that's in the description box as well. Hop on there and look up your address, zoom in on it, and it's going to tell you what your natural area code is. They've got all kinds of different codes on there. And you look it up and you'll see one under that says NAC. That's the code you want to start using. Natural area code. Principles of the laws of nature. I'm not part of your war. I'm a peaceful inhabitant. I'm not using your battle of the forms through your mail system. You want to communicate with me, you communicate in peace. I come in peace. I am in peace. I will pass in peace. I am not a pass-through. Anyway, I hope everybody's catching on to this stuff and realizing how important it is to learn the terminology that you're actually using and learn how to overlook or learn how to look deeper into it so you can see what's actually happening so you can overlook it with the scriptures. The scriptures will tell you everything you need to know. Like I said, Isaiah 44 verse 1 tells us we're supposed to subscribe our surname in Israel, call ourselves by Jacob. Doesn't matter what that record, somebody else put that name on that record. I'm told to call myself by the name Jacob and subscribe by my hand in the surname of Israel. So if you want a signature from me, it's no longer going to be Keith Little. It's going to be Israel. And that's the only thing you're going to get for the signature. It's not going to be Jacob. It's going to be Israel. That's what I'm told to subscribe. It didn't say subscribe by my hand, the surname Jacob Israel. It says I'm supposed to call myself by Jacob and subscribe by my hand, the surname Israel, showing the separation. And that's the problem. Everybody's using a first, middle, and last name, a name and address. They don't know how to separate. Learn how to separate, and you become more aware of the literal language of the word of God that we're supposed to use. Prophets unto the nations. And the law of nations is what everything is written under. This should tell us, that one scripture should tell us we're not subject to any law written in any country, anywhere around the world. We're subject to what's written in our heart, and that is the law of nature. We act accordingly, according to our own nature. Now, according to my nature, I'm a peaceful man. And if I come up against a 360-pound man that wants to fight me, I'm going to do my best to feed him with words. To defeat one's opponent without fighting is a supreme excellence. So if I can prove to him how dumb it is for him to try to beat up on a guy that's 1/3 his size while all these people are looking at him, why don't you just take on 10 of us? Why don't you take on 3 of us? That would make it more reasonable, right? Why don't you let me choose the 3 I want to pick? Because I'm going to pick 3 and then I'm going to step back. Isn't that the agreement? You got to learn how to contract, folks. You got to learn how to take them out of the fight. To defeat one's opponent without fighting is of supreme excellence. So again, I urge everybody to open your eyes and learn how to see, open your ears, learn how to hear. And remember, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. God bless. I forgot to put my PayPal button up here. Let me put my PayPal link up there for anybody that wants to share some love. And remember, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. God bless you. Love you. Have a great day.